You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
It is Sons of the Shoe, Spencer German with you, the obnoxious, I shouldn't say obnoxious, it's a good intro, but it is always way too loud when we start this show. I can barely hear myself think, but here we are. It's Spencer German, no Nick Wilson, because naturally, whenever we try to plan these things out and work around our schedules, something terrible happens, and he's dealing with a car situation. So here we are. I do have a guest, though, lined up for us, and it's a guest that you guys should know, because when I had him on previously, before the season started, I told him we were going to book him again in the lead up to what is the biggest game of the season to this point for the Buckeyes, as we know. Could end up being the biggest game. Well, I shouldn't say that, because as Ohio State fans, I know Michigan will always be the biggest game. But to this point, definitely the biggest game, one of the biggest games in the entire schedule. And I'm pleased to have back to the show for Alec, you are our first double guest, first person we've had on twice on this podcast. So I'm pleased to bring back Alec Dietz, who covers Oregon beat reporter for the Eugene Register Guard. Does a tremendous job of doing so, and we appreciated his analysis leading up to the season. So we're bringing him back now to break down this game, get into the X's and O's of it all, and give us a good preview. Alec, how have you been, my friend? Nice to see you again.
Very, very good. Very good. Very busy. This week has just stepped it up for everybody. So I think everyone's kind of been looking forward to this week. We finally get to talk about the game rather than it being sort of something off in the future. It's Saturday. So excited to get to it.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of treated the first couple games of the schedule for Ohio State as like, I don't know if maybe we have called them tune-ups to Oregon, if we're being honest, but it has kind of felt like each step of the way we're trying to find like different things that signs of growth, if you will, from Ohio State and sort of setting the stage for what this game's going to look like, because we know that Oregon, like Ohio State, has a chance to be a juggernaut, really good team, and it's going to be your biggest challenge. I guess first and foremost, from the Oregon side of things, as you get ready for this matchup, what is the thing that worries you most about this team facing Ohio State?
Gosh, I think if I'm Oregon, what worries me the most is 3 red zone interceptions by Dylan Gabriel in the last 2 weeks. You cannot make those mistakes in a game like this. It's mistakes that he has not made throughout his entire career. I think the number was he had 3 in his entire career before the last 2 weeks, 3 red zone interceptions. And he's obviously had 3 in the last 2 weeks, and you can get away with that against Michigan State and UCLA. But absolutely, Oregon loses this game if he, throws a couple more red zone interceptions. So I think that's probably at the forefront of Oregon's mind. I know they've probably done a couple more red zone reps this week than maybe typically.
They obviously survived earlier in the season, that scare against Boise State. When they came out of that game, what do you think they learned about themselves? Because I always do think we like to use every game as like a measuring stick for where a team is at or how good they are or whatever. But I also think that opening stretch of the schedule where you're playing sometimes inferior opponents, I do think it sometimes presents to teams like Ohio State, teams like Oregon, a chance to learn something and grow. So as they kind of came out of that game, which was their closest game this season, the one that kind of stands out is they almost got upset a little bit. What do you think they learned from that effort?
I think that it's interesting because I think that looking back at that, maybe that wasn't as surprising of a result as it was at the time, just given what Ashton Jeanty has done to pretty much everybody on the schedule this season. But I think that really they hammered out the issues they had along their offensive line. I think Dylan Gabriel was sacked 4 times in that game, I want to say, which is the most in Dan Lanning's 3 years at Oregon. Bo Nix never got sacked 4 times. I think he got sacked. I don't remember the exact number. It might have been 5 times in his 2 years there. So to have that, have that happen in that game, they had some issues in the interior of that offensive line, and they've made a couple changes, and so far, he's barely been touched in each of the past 3 wins, and they've dominated against Oregon State, UCLA, and Michigan State. So really ironing out the kinks in the offensive line, and everyone, I think, just getting a little bit more comfortable. You can see I talked about the Dylan Gabriel's interceptions, but outside of a couple bad plays, everyone is a lot more comfortable than they were in those first few games. They had a lot of new pieces. I mean, these are all household names. Everyone knew who Dylan Gabriel was coming into the season. Evan Stewart, all these guys working together, but they hadn't played together, right, until that Idaho opener and that second Boise State game. So I think they just needed the time to gel, and it certainly looked a lot better over the last 4-ish weeks, since those first two games.
I obviously want to get to Dylan Gabriel because he's going to be a big topic of conversation, but you brought up the sacks in that game, and I know early on the offensive line was an issue, which is funny because we talk about with Ohio State, one of our biggest concerns with the Ohio State team right now is their offensive line. But if I recall, Dan Laney made some changes up front to the offensive line. What were those changes, and what have the results been in terms of getting that group playing a little bit better since he tweaked some things?
Yeah, they were expecting Matthew Bedford, who was a transfer from Indiana, to be a contributor at guard this year, and he suffered an injury about 2 weeks away from their season opener, and it really threw him through a loop. They were planning on playing a certain guy at center, and because of that, they shifted him over to guard, and they were starting a walk-on at center, Charlie Pickard, against Idaho, and they kept with that same unit throughout that entire game, ran into trouble. And then against Boise State, they rotated the entire interior of their line. I think the number was 11 times over the course of that game, which is a lot, right, to make that many changes in one game against Boise State. But since that game, they've kept it consistently with one group. They've had Marcus Harper, who's a 5th or 6th year player playing at guard. Obviously, a Johnny Cornelius and Josh Carnley at tackles. They've been kind of the bookends, and Nashad Strother, who was a transfer from over on the East Coast, I believe East Carolina, from last year. A really experienced 6-year player playing at guard. So they've stuck with that group for the majority, or for the entirety of the last 3 games. And obviously, Dylan Gabriel has kept his jersey clean, when he hasn't scrambled, and it's been very successful since. But obviously, totally different challenge this week against an Ohio State defensive line that features, all of them are probably pros. All of them are going to probably be high draft picks and are pretty good. So, it'll be interesting to see how that line that went through a lot of a tumultuous first 2 weeks and has now settled down, but obviously a stiff test when you're across the field this week.
Yeah, no doubt. And we can talk some more about that here in a little bit. But on the topic of Dylan Gabriel, what have the early returns been? Because, guy who transfers in, we're sort of experiencing the same thing here with Ohio State, right? Like transfer quarterback, high expectations, obviously, got to get acclimated quickly, got to pick things up quickly, get close and have that chemistry with their teammates. You mentioned the red zone interceptions being an issue the last couple of weeks. But what have the early returns been in terms of his play on the field and what he's brought to this Oregon Ducks team?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, he brought stability, experience, which I think is why the red zone turnovers have sort of been an anomaly and frustrating, because it's not something that a 6th-year quarterback, those mistakes shouldn't be happening, right? It's not his first go around. He's probably going to break Bo Nix's record for most starts ever that Bo Nix set last season. But outside of a few plays, he's been steady. He leads college football in completion percentage. Already thrown for over 1,000 yards. Thrown for some touchdowns. Obviously experienced in the huddle. Has been through the transfer process before. So really a stabilizing force and a guy that is experienced, if anything else. He's played in these games before. You look back at the Red River showdown last year when he led Oklahoma to that win against Texas. He's been in these moments before, and I know they have high expectations for him, which is why, again, those turnovers have been sort of an anomaly, and I think they hope that those are get him out of the way against Michigan State and UCLA before this game.
How important is it that not only he has success throwing the football, but that he gets things going with his legs and that Oregon uses him that way, especially against, like you mentioned, an Ohio State defensive line that is super aggressive, very athletic, talented guys up front. Just how much of that element of his game is do you think is going to matter in this matchup on Saturday?
Yeah, I think they've, in the opening few weeks, didn't really have him use his legs. Certainly nothing by design, but he was pretty content with staying in the pocket and getting rid of the ball fast and making those high percentage completions and letting his receivers work. I don't anticipate it being all that much different. They still want to stretch the field and dish it out to as many guys as possible and let them do work. But I do imagine, in the recent weeks, they've let him run around with his legs. They've called quarterback keepers, read options to keep defenses honest, and his legs are definitely a weapon. I think he had 16 rushing touchdowns for Oklahoma last season as a quarterback, and certainly I think that was a bigger part of his game and their scheme at Oklahoma last year than it was at Oregon. But they know that he has the ability to beat teams with his legs. And certainly I think the playbook will be wide open this week. I don't think there'll be anything held back to not show anything or, and all that. So yeah, it will be interesting to see how much they open it up and how much he's given free rein to run.
I was going to ask that next. Do you think there's been from Dan Lanning some reserving some things for this game and not giving too much away so far this season because they knew this one was coming?
Yeah, I mean, you never know for sure, but it definitely you got the feeling when you watch them against some teams that they kept it pretty vanilla because they knew they could beat teams playing vanilla. I'm sure Ohio State's been similar in a lot of their game plan. You can beat teams by throwing slants and drag routes and running pretty standard run plays. So it'll be interesting to see what they dial up. I imagine both teams have some tricks up their sleeve and. And Will Howard is a similar quarterback, right? A guy that can use his legs and, probably hasn't used his legs as much as he can. And certainly will be, I'm sure will be given free rein to do that this week if that's to their advantage.
I think that Dan Lanning is one of the best up and coming coaches in this sport. If we can still say that about him in a way. But I do think his biggest games were against Washington these last couple of years, and he's lost those. How much does this game mean in terms of Dan Lanning kind of taking that next step where he is held in higher esteem with some of these other great coaches around college football?
Yeah, I think that he's not really thinking about any of that stuff, right? He's, sometimes it's coach speak to say, we want to be 1-0 this week. We're focusing on the next opponent, but I truly think he really does mean that. Obviously is very excited about this weekend. I think that he is excited about the opportunity that this is for Oregon. Game day is coming here and, it's not like Oregon's some emerging program, but they're a national brand. And this is the first top 5 matchup ever played at Autzen Stadium. And it's a big deal. This is their entry into the Big Ten and to proving that they're not, just a new kid on the block, that they can come and win this conference in year one and beat the, one of the powerhouses of the Big Ten in year one. So, I think from an outside perspective, just from us, it's a fascinating game, right? Dan Lanning certainly has the rap that he can't win that game that matters. Last season went to Seattle and lost on a missed field goal, was able to battle their way back to playoff contention, facing Washington again and again, couldn't get it done. And the same could kind of be said of Ryan Day in recent years, right? I know Michigan has been an elusive. Hello?
I got you. I don't know what happened.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. It's been an elusive win for them, and I think that it'll be interesting to see. Someone has to win this game, right? So it's fascinating from just two coaches that are that have been near the top but want to get to that next level and compete for a national championship.
Yeah, no, I think there's some parallels there for sure. Ryan Day's done it maybe on a little bit of a bigger stage, but the big thing with him, you got to what I wanted because you kind of gave me the Dan Lanning answer at first, where it was like, he's not focused on that, but you did kind of get to the point that there is some talk among you guys, either in the media or fans of hey, he's got to win that big game. That's been the thing that's kind of eluded him. And Ryan Day obviously has a lot of that as well, given how the last couple of years have gone against Michigan. You mentioned before the season started that this Oregon defensive line is not something to sleep on. Do you think that's an area that maybe they have an advantage, is that defensive line against Ohio State's offensive line that I think has been better this year than last year, but still is probably the biggest area of concern that we have with this Ohio State team?
Yeah, I think that the defense as a whole has been playing lights out for Oregon. They have been more consistent than Oregon's offense throughout the entirety of the season. They certainly ran into trouble against Ashton Jeanty, but like I said before, who hasn't? So that has been a strength. The emergence of Jordan Birch, who was a consensus top 10-5 recruit when he came out of high school, went to South Carolina, and has only been now sort of reaching that full potential that everyone sort of knew he had as a game wrecker and a 6'6", 280-pound monster. Derek Harmon, who Ohio State's very familiar with, he was at Michigan State last season. And, you throw in Jamari Caldwell, who transferred from Houston and has been doing all the dirty work along the defensive line. So they've been a really strong unit. And they've also been able to get pressure with blitzes, whether it's Jeff Bossa at linebacker or Bryce Betcher, who's a two-sport athlete. He also plays baseball for Oregon. Or from the safeties and defensive backs as well. So they've been very strong, but on that same token, I think that they haven't been tested by a truly elite offense yet. I think that, again, outside of Jeanty at Boise State and just what he's been able to do by himself, certainly Idaho isn't going to impress everybody with their offense. Oregon State isn't ranking near the top in many offensive categories, and the same goes for UCLA and Michigan State. So totally different challenge this week to face this receiver room, and certainly two of the better running backs in the country as well. So it's going to be fascinating to see if all that early season momentum can carry over into Eugene this week.
Have you ever seen anything like Jeremiah Smith before?
Oh man, he's something else. I think for his age, him and Ryan Williams out of Bama, it's certainly both those guys as 18 or 17 or however old they are. It's impressive. It's just I've only been able to watch some of the highlights, and there are a lot of them, so it is, I guess, quite a lot of plays. But certainly excited to see him in person. I think that'll be a completely different experience, and obviously a challenge that Oregon's defensive backs are savoring this week.
I described him as like a road to glory, like creative player, like that you just like you can set all the percentage, like all his qualities to like whatever the highest you can go. I mean, he's something made in the lab, man. It's insane. Along those lines, do you think Oregon needs to be more worried about Quinshon Judkins or Jeremiah Smith?
Man, I think that games like this are won through the run game. And Jeremiah Smith, obviously terrific player, great player. It's no knock on receivers, but whoever is able to establish the run in this game or stop the run in this game is going to have a huge leg up, right? Like controlling the pace, keeping the ball away from the other offense. I think the running backs and the offensive line play by both teams is going to be the key to this game, and staying ahead of the sticks, right? Not getting behind, not giving up sacks, so you get off balance on offense, or have one team. Oregon does not want to be in a game where Dylan Gabriel throws 50 passes. They want to be balanced. They want to be able to run the ball and establish the ball and maintain possession. And I imagine Ohio State's the same way. I don't think they want Will Howard throwing 50 passes in this game. They want to be able to run the ball down Oregon's throat and have Howard beat him over the top when it's there. So I think the run game is going to be really key for this game.
I will just a couple more minutes here, and I want to go next to just kind of a what if scenario, or a fill in the blank sort of scenario for you. Sure. Oregon will win this game if.
Oregon will win this game if they win the turnover battle and critical downs. I think, when you look at any of these top 5 matchups, the teams that win the turnover battle, that don't give the ball away on the goal line, that get that key turnover, however it may be, get those extra possessions, have a huge leg up. And then it's going to be, I mean, this game's going to be decided by a few plays, a fourth down on the goal line. If a team's able to score a touchdown or get stopped, maybe even a 3rd and 5 from midfield right at the end of the half, or, those kind of downs are going to be the downs that decide this game. So I think that the turnover battle, those key downs, and then I think the run game are going to be the big 3 factors in this game.
Should the winner of this game go to number 1?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Bama just lost last week. It makes the most sense. It's jumping Texas. Bama still probably has, I don't know. Well, actually, I guess Vanderbilt now has the best one in the country, for being honest with ourselves.
I guess.
I guess I'd put Bama's win over Georgia as the second best win. But, Texas's win over Michigan, that was something. But now that looks a little bit not as good because Michigan just lost for a second time. I'd probably say that, this is the third. This becomes like the best win in the country, or second best win in the country behind Vanderbilt, like I said. Once this game goes final. So yeah, I agree with you, man. Well, hey, listen, he's Alec Dietz again. I didn't reset it at all during that conversation because I was just so locked in on everything he was saying. Alec Dietz, he does a great job covering the University of Oregon, the Oregon Ducks, for the Eugene Register Guard. Second time we've had him on, and you knocked it out of the park, man. I'm very much looking forward to this game. I wish I could say that I was coming out there to actually watch this one in person and see it live. A, because it's going to be awesome, but B, because I hear Autzen Stadium is just incredible, an incredible environment, so it would have been a lot of fun. But I will be watching this one from home. So, but I hope we get a chance to reconnect and maybe, like you said, maybe Big Ten championship game, maybe
even after in the playoff. It's 2024 in football, so it's a wild world out there, that's for sure. But I'm excited. It's going to be packed. Obviously game day is going to be there, and they bring a whole different element to these atmospheres. And I know fans are really looking forward to the game this Saturday. The whole town's pretty much going to shut down, so it should be a heck of a game.
He's Alec Dietz again on Twitter at Alec Dietz. If you want to follow him and get the scoop on Oregon leading up to this one. Alec, can't thank you enough again, man. And like I said, I hope we get a chance to connect down the line, but we'll text or something at some point.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Always fun.
Absolutely. We'll be right back, guys. We'll recap everything Alec had to say, continue previewing this matchup on the other side. But first, here's a quick word from our sponsors.